Hello, I'm King Link, and well, I have some thoughts about game length. So I mentioned in my last review that I was going to do a thoughts video and didn't have a topic. Well, thank you to Polygon, because on Thursday I read this article, and sure enough, I now have a topic. Without going over every piece of this article, the opening is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the title is what it is, and I'll admit, it's relevant to me. I'm actually making this video because I have 2 reviews on the burner that I'm working on, but I just haven't finished either game. So let's quickly start with the article, ignoring that it's not 2020 already. That's the first mistake, and really the only real mistake in the article. The article is mostly that title. I don't mean to belittle it. If you want to read it, I will throw a link in the description. It's decent writing and kind of interesting. Though I do think it's a flawed opinion. Though they're opinions, so I can't say that they are fully wrong. For the most part, I think most people can understand the topic though, so I won't go too much into that. But the topic is, of course, specifically how much better Outer Worlds is since it's only 20 hours. And before you ask, no, I haven't played Outer Worlds. I will eventually, but there's so many voices already talking about it, so much hype, and that's kind of what I try to avoid with my reviews. I also don't want to just read the article, so I'll give you a very quick summation. Cass Marshall likes Outer Worlds because it's shorter. It's 20 hours versus 100 hours. Cass just doesn't have time to play these longer games. Let me give you a specific paragraph highlighted on the screen that kind of sums up a big piece of this article. I just have stuff going on in real life that cuts down on my gaming time, and it's literally my job to be involved in video games. I can't imagine how much worse it would be if I had an office job, or if my husband and I had kids. As it is, real life occasionally crashes over me and knocks me off my feet. How are people supposed to gobble down a 100-hour game in today's economy? What? Okay, there's a lot in that paragraph. I do want to talk about game length, but let's go over this also. Quick background though, Cass Marshall did write the Polygon review for Outer Worlds. And after a quick look, it appears the only one she wrote. So yes, this opinion does matter. I don't know for sure if she's trying to respond to other criticisms with this, but yeah, we're going to go into it. And just also to clarify, this is a response to this article. It's not attacking Cass Marshall herself. She seems pretty talented, but I think she's wrong. And to Cass, to respond, I would say your job is literally playing video games. Yes, I mean, you're a writer, you have to produce content too, but you get your games early. And I'm not going to say you should be playing all your games outside of work for free, but I also really question any video game reviewer who doesn't play games in their spare time. It's like a movie critic who never watches movies except when they are paid to. And yeah, I'm also a reviewer. I actually don't get paid for this, but I still play games outside of this so that I can review them. And bonus points, I have a kid. I don't know how I deal with that. Kind of ignore them when I can, you know? That's going to get me in trouble. But the point, though, is if you need 2 or 3 weeks to play a game at the office, that might take 100 hours to review. Let's say you do 40 hours a week of playing. That's something you need to talk about with your job at work, not written up for work, championing shorter games. Now, I'm going to just switch to some gameplay so you're not just staring at these words, but let's continue talking about it. Now, the second part of the question, though, is, I think, a bigger problem. How are people supposed to gobble down a 100-hour game in today's economy? Simple answer, the same way they always have. First, the idea that today's economy is radically different than last year's or last decade's, I think that's bull. Whatever, this is a call out to be more political than needs to be. I'm not going to rise to that. I think it's just a dumb comment and completely out of place in this argument. But here's the other side. I grew up playing video games. I play games now. Even when I was crunching to release games, I still somehow found time to play games. How do you play a 100-hour game? Well, you get 2 or 3 hours and you play a little bit. Do that about 50 times and you rack up about 100 hours. Gamers aren't under time limits on how long they have to play a game, so they can take their time with longer games. A game that takes longer to play is better because most people have to actually buy their games. And this is something I feel reviewers tend to forget. If they're not directly paying for their games, either because an outlet pays or they get review copies, they seem to forget there's an important value consideration for games by many of the consumers out here. Now, if you want to talk about how games are paced or how games leave your consciousness after playing, which is something she brings up, that's a different topic and should be a question about the quality of the game. Again, like your literal job. Your job is to talk about the qualities that make a specific piece of media better or worse than other pieces of media. For instance, Final Fantasy XIII is easily a forgettable game, at least to me, but has a massive encyclopedia about the lore. I think it is a failure, though, that they felt that they needed that encyclopedia when I can still remember most of the scenes and story pieces of Final Fantasy 4, 6, 7, 10, decades after the fact. But again, that is a different discussion and something about the game itself. So, Cass, I just feel that you're wrong about this, and sorry, but it at least is an interesting idea. So let's think about this further and see if there's a better answer. What is the correct length of a game? And of course, that depends on the type of game. As I said, I'm making this video because I have a similar problem. I'm currently sitting on two very meaty games. We're talking about 30 hours in on Hyperdementia Neptunia Rebirth 1, and over 40 hours so far on my time at Portia. So how long should these games take? Now, my first thought is if you're watching the video, you're already seeing a random late day in my time at Portia. This seems somewhat repetitive. You're seeing what my character goes through in a normal day in their life. But this is really what's done for over 40 hours. Wake up, go collect resources, get a job, complete the job, turn it in, get rewards, then do something else with the rest of my day. Kind of like a real job. But is this okay for it to be over 40 hours, maybe even 60 hours long? I mean, it's based on Harvest Moon, and of course, based on, well, this game, Stardew Valley, where, again, we wake up, work my crops, go to town, pass out wine usually. This is a very late part of the game, but the point is that these are life simulators. You do highly repetitive actions for reasons. It's the major gameplay loop of these games. So what's the correct length for these games? Well, I think it's already a pretty good example that there's not a correct length for these life simulators. You want enough content so people will come back, whether it be the very long story missions in My Time at Portia or Stardew Valley's huge number of characters you can build relationships with. Each game has a reason, and honestly, I love chasing down all the museum pieces at Stardew Valley and all the stars. I love seeing what's coming next in My Time at Portia. It's all about experiencing each world on its own. And both of these games are kind of special in that there's not really a target length to the game that they should be aiming for, but rather a target content amount that gives the player an ability to keep exploring and finding new things and pushes them past, 20, 30, even 130 hours in Stardew for me. Now, not every game is Stardew. There are, of course, going to be other games, but for this genre, the length isn't a key. So let's get to the second thought, and my recent review of Slay the Spire is fresh in my mind. If you don't know, this is a roguelite game in that you try to beat the spire, win, lose, or draw, and then you restart over and over and over. If you've never played roguelites, the whole point of these games isn't just to beat the game on the first attempt. If you can do that, kudos. That's really impressive, but it's also probably impossible. On the other hand, Slay the Spire is meant to be played multiple times. I've played at least 20 hours of this game, and probably could hit closer to 100 if I really wanted to stick with it. The entire game is engaging, and the randomizing factors keep me wanting to play more. Each game gives me a different deck, and I can choose a different character, different relics, different abilities, different enemies, and different events, as you can see. You don't know what's going to happen, so you might beat the game this run, or, there's always the ability to start over. Now, each game only lasts about maybe 30 minutes, an hour if you're very slow, but the high replayability means that an hour-long game can be repeated hundreds of times if it's done well. Quality matters on roguelites far more than the length of them, and I would actually say longer roguelites are a problem, because so much of the game is about turning over and starting again that you don't want to be too invested in it. That's one of the things I really didn't like that much about Cultist Simulator. I found myself investing too much time in each game and not understanding enough about it. It also wasn't random enough to be different each playthrough, just not my type of game. So, a roguelite should be fast, such as, Binding of Isaac. Now, little disclosure, I'm terrible at this game. But repetition is key here, so each game might take maybe an hour, you can get hundreds of hours out of a good roguelite, and so playing them multiple times is the idea of the genre. And one of my buddies actually loves Binding of Isaac, and he's played like hundreds and hundreds of hours of the game. He keeps going back to it because he doesn't have a lot of time to invest, and that's great. If that's what he finds that he loves, that's perfect. He's found his game. So, for the third thought, let's take both the roguelite idea and the life simulator and see if we can come up with an idea for other games. What is the proper length of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, or Death Stranding? Modern Warfare's campaign seems to be taking about 6 hours. Death Stranding says it can last about 50 hours. So, does that make Modern Warfare a better game or a worse game? Because it's only about 1/9 as long as Death Stranding. Is the longer game better or the shorter game better? Or is this the dumbest question ever asked? Yeah, it's pretty bad. Maybe not the dumbest, but this is the point. First, Modern Warfare and Death Stranding aren't even in the same genres. So let's try to do better. Is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild a better game than Link's Awakening because Breath of the Wild takes over 50 hours to beat, and Link's Awakening probably takes about 15? Okay, so those might be different genres. So let's try one last time. Outer Worlds is 20 hours, Witcher 3 is at least 50 hours, if not close to 100. Which is better based on hours? Do we get how ridiculous these questions are yet? The thing is, on the list of stuff that will make any of these games good or bad, length is probably a very low importance value. The qualities that make a game good or bad start with very big topics like graphics. Unfortunately, it's very high up, especially for some people. Story, which is broken up into how the narrative is delivered, the perceived qualities of the game, the themes that have gone through, and more. And of course, gameplay, which can be judged in almost any way or none for some people. To me, however, there are far more important values than length. Not even these, there's even more. What is the proper length of a game? Well, however long it actually takes. I've already done a video on grinding. The short version is that I'm against it in almost every genre outside of incremental games, which is the game. But if a game starts to pad their length with additional grinding, that's bad, but that's a gameplay consideration. If a game is like The Witcher, which had 50 to 100 hours of interesting, meaningful content with almost no grinding involved, then there's nothing wrong with that length. There is a problem with game lengths, though, but it's such a rare thing that it's not a major topic. About a year ago, I actually played a really fun, interesting game called Manual Samuel, and it lasted 90 minutes. There are clever ideas, clever gameplay, and some good writing that 90 minutes later, I was annoyed that I wanted more. And the fact is that such a thing is a problem for games being too short. I know I called out my friend Pedro for a very similar problem, clocking in at only 5 hours to play through an entire game. But the proper length of a genre or a game should be defined by that game itself, not the genre it's in. If a game is great for 100 hours, kudos to that game, and I'm sure very busy gaming masses will find time to play. That's better because if it takes a month or two for a gamer to beat a game and they're having a great time like I am with my time at Porsche, then there's nothing wrong with longer games. As long as the game is good, the length shouldn't matter. And I do find it absurd that a reviewer is the one going, games should be shorter because I don't have time to play them. It does explain why critics tend not to finish games before reviewing them, but it doesn't mean the industry itself should aim for 20-hour games just to appease reviewers when players want longer experiences. It is the player who ultimately has to spend their hard-earned money on a game and get the most value for that money. To me, I've always been looking for a longer experience, and I honestly don't think that's changed in the last few years. So what's the right length of a game? Well, I think that's a question for each game individually. This is a discussion for when talking about how a game spends your time, and what you look for in a game rather than hitting a specific time limit due to it being in a genre. I'd much rather have an amazing game that takes 100 hours than games that rush through the story in 8 hours. But I would also prefer a tighter story that takes 8 hours than a game that unnecessarily adds combat for over 60 hours and has the same amount of story as that 8-hour game. JRPGs, I'm looking directly at you for that one. So let's do one last case study, a pair of games, Thomas Was Alone and Portal. Now these are amazing games that are perfect in execution and length. If they were any longer, they wouldn't be as good. The length isn't the only consideration here, but their length is perfect in service to the rest of the game, and that's what makes both Thomas Was Alone and Portal amazing experiences. And that is my thoughts on game length. As for the games in the video, we have My Time at Porsche, Stardew Valley, Slay the Spire, Binding of Isaac, Witcher 3, Manual Samuel, and of course, Portal. If you're curious, I can actually recommend any of them outside of Manual Samuel, as I talked about before. Now, thanks for listening, I appreciate it. What do you think about this topic, or am I completely off base here? And if you want to see more from me, I'm going to put up my quite old video on grinding and my recent review of Slay the Spire. I will hopefully be back soon to talk about My Time at Porsche. Until then, I'm King Link, and thanks for watching.